Welcome back to ArtBeat. And my guests for this second segment of the show are Charlotte Jackson, friend of the show. Charlotte Jackson Fine Art is one of the Rail Yard Arts District galleries, a beautiful gallery. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thanks.
It's good to have you. It's been a while.
I know.
And the artist, Edith Baumann, is here from Los Angeles. Welcome, Edith.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. And you're having a show that's opening tomorrow night at Charlotte Jackson Fine Art. The title of the show is Painting the Unseen. I could immediately launch into the art, and I'd love to, but Charlotte, tell us how you came across Edith's work, how you decided to host an exhibition for her.
Well, I was, and I think I was out at an art fair or something in Los Angeles, and I happened to come across somebody who had told me about a show that had, it was a group show that had Ed Moses in it, who I represent. And so I went in to see the show, and Edith's work was there, and I said, whose work is this? I really like it. And I tracked her down. And I called her up, and we set up a time to get together, and I went out and made a studio visit. And she came to the, I invited her to send some work to the gallery, and we've been incorporating. As a matter of fact, one of her pink paintings was in the Pink show.
Pink Crush.
Gorgeous Pink Crush
show.
Was such a beautiful show, and that painting was so beautiful. And so, she's been incorporated in many group shows, but this is the first one-person show that she's having with us, and we're really it's a beautiful show, beautiful.
Now, Edith, tell us how you knew Ed Moses and what your background is. You're an LA-based artist, and of course, Charlotte shows many LA-based artists. I can see from your work there's a big connection visually, too. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No. Well, I mean, I've known Ed Moses since the early 70s.
Uh-huh.
And I've been in a lot of group shows with Ed over the years. And the particular show that Charlotte saw, there were, and I've forgotten now, there was 4 or 5 of us.
There was a group.
I'd have to name them. But anyway, it was the same people that we had done a show in Austin, Texas. Frances Colpett was LA-based, and she's a writer for...
Right, she wrote for Art in America.
Art in America. She did an Art in America review for me in the 80s.
I read that. It was fabulous.
And so she championed the abstract painters in LA at the time. But so she had moved to Austin, and she had us do a group show there in Austin. It was the same group of people. So one of the guys decided, let's do it again. It's 20 years later or 25, whatever it was. The same people, and it was a big enough space. So that was cool. And so then we used that photograph that had actually been taken by Frances's. We were on the other side of the swimming pool, lined up.
Yeah, it was great. That was a great image.
And so we just used that image for the show. So it was 20 or 25 years.
And what is your background? Where did you study art?
I was somebody who I was math science and I don't know when you know that, and I talk about it or whatever, you can kind of see where I'm coming from with my work. Equations and binary systems and things like that. But so I came to art late as far as doing it full time. I was somebody who could draw when I was a kid, but I didn't pursue that. And then I was actually a marine biologist at UCLA. So
wow.
I was a marine biology major. I wasn't a marine biologist at UCLA, and
still impressive.
Started to take art classes, and sort of, for me, it was something that I realized that I'd always wanted to do, but maybe was afraid to even try because maybe I'm not good enough. And if
Right.
you never do it, you never know, and then you think you could do it,
Right.
but you never find out that you failed at it, or whatever. And anyway, I didn't really realize that, but I'd been successful doing a number of other things, and finally took a stab at it. And
How long ago was that?
I think, but I only had 3 quarters at UCLA before I graduated. So I had 2 quarters, and then I took 1 of independent study because I had to have so many credits to actually have a degree in it. So I had all these credits, but not enough to get a degree in anything. So I actually got my degree in art January of 1975.
Great.
So I started in 1974.
Now, Charlotte and Edith, you might want to take turns with this. The title of the exhibition, again, opening this Friday at Charlotte Jackson Fine Art, is Painting the Unseen. Let's delve into that idea of the unseen and how that translates with your work. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do this, Edith, but you might want to check
Jump
in.
Right.
Charlotte, describe Edith's work for us.
Well, initially, when I first saw the work, when I first went to her studio, it sort of looked like a chemistry lab because she actually makes all of her own paint.
Ooh.
She grinds her pigments. She's got blenders and mixers and all kinds of things in this sort of kitchen-like area. And I was fascinated by that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you started doing that because you were allergic to some pigments of
back
some
in the
sort.
70s.
Yeah. So anyway, she has, pioneered this kind of painting, which, when you're grinding your own pigment and mixing your own paint, that's a whole another world.
It is.
I know very few artists that do it. Actually, one of the other artists that I know that did it, I don't know that she still does it, was Marcia Hafif. So mostly it's women that I know that do this. I'm not sure whether we can translate that into anything other than being interesting. But, and so she... the surfaces are, of course, what I was always interested in looking at, because
Yes.
that's what I like, And, she talked to me a little bit about how she's putting layers and layers of paint on. But there is this kind of, they don't feel heavy. They feel like veils of color. And I'm not sure if that's a good way to describe your work or not. I don't know that you would describe it that way.
I always say there's 10 to 20 layers of translucent layers, and so, some of them don't translate through, when there's that many, but there's many things coming through because it's pretty thin, each coat.
So these are washes almost of hand?
Well, I mean, they're a little bit more than wash, but they're certainly not like a gouache,
Right.
And it's not like taping and spraying, where it's very opaque, and
Right.
basically you would just have 2 colors. So, and I'm moving back and forth from the surround area to the area of the rectangles. So, I'm moving back and forth, a little bit cooler, a little bit warmer, changing the color.
Now, for those of you who may not be able to look at an image online right now, which, by the way, you can go to charlottejackson.com to see images of Edith Baumann's work. Let's just make it very simple. I'm looking at an image of one of your paintings. It's called Random Structure from 2014. Essentially, it's a yellow background with some blue rectangles spaced around it. Almost, it has a little bit of an ARP-ish look in terms of, dropping pieces of paper onto a flat surface and letting them randomly take their place, but I suspect that you don't think about it like that at all, do you?
No, but I like that sort of universal principle of randomness and structure happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of coming from that, and I basically start with center. All of them have a center, even if it's just a defined empty center, and then the rectangles move out from the center. And I think of them as like heart centering with the energy moving out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just start with the center and then move out. And I cut these rectangles, and so it's really very specific, but it can take weeks sometimes to figure out the structure and to have it, sort of be, it's almost balanced, but it's not quite. It's tweaked. The negative space is as important as the positive space of the rectangles and what's in between. And for a while I named them jazz notes because I was just trying to, what can I do to get people to be able to relate to them or see that there's something more or whatever. But even though I listen to jazz all the time, I realize that a lot of people, jazz is randomness and structure, and that, and music is that. It's highly structured. You have this
It's
set
highly
of
mathematical.
notes. It's highly mathematical. It's, yet there's jazz is very improvisational. And so even though I wasn't thinking that way to begin with, like, oh, okay, that's what I want to do, I thought, well, maybe that would help explain it. But then I realized lots of people don't know that much about jazz, so it really didn't help. So,
well, I just want to say my experience with jazz, and I was a terrible jazz improv person, so I'm not coming from there. I'm just coming from the people around me who played jazz when I was in school. Jazz really is all about people who really know music and music theory inside out, and they know their instruments and what their instruments can and can't do, and then they make it do something that it can't do. Jazz is for those people who have so much knowledge of the theory and their instruments themselves, that then they break free.
Right.
And I can see how your work is very similar in its effect. It's very paradoxical. It's about the surface, of course, but then your rectangles seem to break free of the surface and shimmer and dance on the surface. It's about color. Some people, of course, are going to find that hard-edged geometry might be their way of describing this, which I don't think it is either. But let's take a break and have you talk some more, Edith and Charlotte, about the paradox that is your painting, about this show, works by Edith Baumann. The title of the exhibition is Painting the Unseen. It's opening Friday night from 5 to 7. The artist will be there at Charlotte Jackson Fine Art in the Rail Yard Arts District. So we'll see you there, and we'll be right back.
Now back to ArtBeat with your host, Catherine Davis.
Welcome back to ArtBeat, where we listen to art on the radio. I'm talking with the artist Edith Baumann, whose show Painting the Unseen is opening. It's a solo exhibition opening at Charlotte Jackson Fine Art tomorrow night from 5 to 7. And Charlotte and Edith are here. I wanted to just have you have a conversation about, first of all, we need to talk about color with your work. I think we need to talk about stillness and movement, the static versus the dynamic. Charlotte, you just told during the break, you told us that when Edith arrived to see your gallery and her work all in place in the gallery with all of this natural, beautiful northern New Mexico light, you were, Edith, surprised by the colors, even though you made them and you're a colorist. Talk about color in your work and how we might think of a painting, say, as the black and red painting, and then on closer inspection find that there's much more involved than that.
Well, I mean, I'm very involved in color, and so, is a red, if there's 10 layers and there's yellows and oranges and
right,
that's different than when there's blues and blacks or whatever underneath those reds and coming through, or when I grind the pigments, and if I'm adding a little bit of blue or if I'm adding a little bit of yellow or orange or something, then you're going to come up with different reds.
Exactly.
And, plus you have that whole thing of if a red is next to a black or a blue or yellow, it changes the red.
Well, you've studied Joseph Albers, I'm going to guess.
Well, I didn't study him, but I'm certainly, I know that he did that, and I'm aware of it. And, you get that in color theory, and
right.
And I see it. I'm very aware of, if a dress, orange is my favorite color, but there's a lot of oranges I don't particularly like or I wouldn't wear because, maybe that's beautiful on that lawn chair, but, my skin has a lot of yellow in it, and so that looks really good on somebody that has a lot of pink in their skin, but maybe not on mine. I need a lot of red. And, I'm very aware of color. I see color. A lot of people don't see those nuances of color.
It's true.
And I don't know whether they just haven't thought about it, or maybe, the longer I'm involved in it, the more I know certain people's eyes, they see different things.
We do.
So,
and in fact, the history of painting, especially modern painting, say from the Impressionists forward,
right.
is about how we perceive color. First of all, how the painter lays the color onto the canvas, and then how the viewer sees it and
right.
what the viewer might see.
Right. Well, and even though these are all very layered, I'm not taping and spraying and getting an opaque surface. Even the 7-foot ones, the largest brush I use is maybe 1.5 inches.
Ooh.
And so it's all, it's all hand done. And for me, it just makes a difference in how it comes across. It's not important to know it or show it, but it's just going to look different than if it's taped and sprayed, or
Absolutely.
how big of a brush you're using, and it just comes across.
Well, and I think when I look at the large blue painting, it's very painterly. Even though they feel like a solid color painting, there's a tremendous amount happening on them, and they're very painterly. The way the paint is applied is very painterly.
Yeah. Well, and some show it more than others, just depending on the color.
Yeah.
If a red's going over an orange or whatever, maybe you're not quite as aware of that orange. But I always make decisions too about, does it need one more layer of that color to kind of pull it together? Yeah. But some do and some don't, and I just make decisions about that for that particular painting. I don't have a set, it's got to reach this amount.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, I don't have a formula of it's got to reach that amount of opaqueness or not, or I just don't do that.
Well, it's an interesting, again, this paradox of opposites working together, and I'm seeing it as sort of this Buddhistic whole, which is, of course, the void. So I'm looking at something, but it's not really there. Again, I can see the title, Painting the Unseen. But your work initially, especially on paper when it's reproduced or on the internet, it looks quite flat. It looks as if it's just made of two colors. But I can see, and in hearing you talk and reading about the work on the internet and from the press release Charlotte sent me, that this work is very much about the physical act of painting, and also the dynamics of the objects on the canvas as they lie on this two-dimensional surface, and then they start nestling into each other, even though they're not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, it's true. And I mean, recently in the I can't remember. I'd have to sort of look at the dates on paintings. I started because essentially they were all kind of two color, even though I went through this whole process. But then I decided that, well, if for me they really are about energy, and so if they are, then let's get away from all those abstract notions of of what it's supposed to do and not do, and I mean, for me it's like all that theory of Ad Reinhardt and all the things you can't do or whatever, and it's like, just let's totally get away from that, and let's accentuate those rectangles by putting a third color. And even though that third color might be a whole bunch of different colors too, it just makes them dance a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to accentuate the energy of them, and that also doesn't really translate graphically,
right?
To
right.
JPEGs and on paper and so forth, they look very graphic, but it does make them dance a bit more, and I like it. So and some of them do it a little bit more than others, and some of them you barely see that that's happening, yet. I mean, let's just say black and red painting, and then there's another black and red painting that maybe I did earlier, and it doesn't have that edge. They're very different on how they act in space, and there's always this. I mean, like the centering, where they all have these centers. I mean, I've always felt like people may not really realize, like they may get pulled in because of the color or something, but that can be acting also, where they're getting pulled in from that center, yet they don't know why. They don't really maybe recognize.
They're not theorizing about why.
Right.
They're just experiencing it.
And they're just experiencing it, and they don't know what's pulling them in. Mm-hmm. To what's making a relationship between the painting and with them, and that's fine. I mean,
there's a very compelling tension, I think, between the painterliness, which I don't think is actually a word, of your work. You seem to be a painter's painter, would you say that, Charlotte?
Absolutely. And we had painters coming in yesterday, and it will be a show for other artists. Yeah. This is one of those shows where she is a painter's painter. Absolutely. And I said that yesterday. I said that to you. Yeah. That's exactly what I said. Mm-hmm. This is, it's just, there are some artists like that are.
And Edith Baumann is one of them.
Right.
Well, when you paint for 45 years... You
hope you get somewhere, right?
I mean, yeah. Well, and and you know your materials, and and it's fun to stretch them and push them.
Well, how exciting! I can't wait to see this opening tomorrow night for Edith Baumann at Charlotte Jackson Fine Art. The title of the solo exhibition is "Painting the Unseen." And we'll all see you down there in the Rail Yard Arts District. Thank you, Charlotte Jackson. Thank you, Edith Baumann.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you. This is ArtBeat, and I will be back next week.